My senior prom. This goes back to 2002. I was a senior in high school, and prom was right around the corner. I was single at the time, but kind of on again, off again with a girl. She had asked if I'd like to take her to prom, and I said, yeah, sure, why not? The week before, of course, she canceled. She wasn't going, and didn't want to mess with it all. Whatever. Most of my friends, except two, were going. One wasn't from the same school district, in fact. Come the day of course, I was kind of bummed out then, even if not initially. So meet up with these two guys, Dave and Jake, that evening. Jake somehow managed to get a 12-pack of beer and a bottle of vodka despite being 18 years old. The plan was to take Dave's car and go cruising, find a party to crash after their prom and get torn up. I really didn't like drinking heavily and still don't, but was feeling pretty shitty, didn't even care. We stopped by Dave's sister's house to get a CD, a Misfits CD. Jake and I wait in the car while Dave's rummaging through the house. While in the car shooting the shit, Jake gets a call on his phone, Nokia baby, from our buddy Mark from school. Apparently some guy or guys have been trying to put the moves on the girl he was talking to at prom, and he stepped in to say something about it outside and took a punch to the eye. Now Mark is a nice guy. He's pretty passive but looks like trouble. He wore a short mohawk and looked almost just like Heroin Bob from SLC Punk. This isn't the type of thing that usually goes on in his life. It was, however, in mine. I got into a lot of pretty big fights and stupid fights in high school. Apparently the guys, three of them, told him if he wanted to talk about it further to meet them behind the school, so he's calling us. He doesn't want to look like a pussy in front of this girl and needs a hand. We got nothing better to do, so we make the decision for Dave before he has a chance to agree or object. Dave doesn't seem to mind one way or another. We all kind of honestly thought if we showed up outnumbering them, they just back down anyways. So we get there, meet up with Mark, who's pacing around outside smoking a cigarette. Rather than waste time, we just agreed to get this shit over with and go around behind the school. Unsurprisingly, given the event, it's crowded as hell, even behind the school. People are standing around smoking, making out, puking, etc. Off to the left across the parking lot is a fairly narrow alley leading behind an office building and a church. Mark suggests they're probably there if they're still here at all. We agree and casually stroll into the alley. Mark's leading the way, all decked out for prom in a goddamn tuxedo even. Now, to frame this part here more accurately, this alley is narrow enough that all four of us can't stand shoulder to shoulder in it. Only three of us can fit at once, so we had Dave behind us. Mark wastes no time and yells, "Hey assholes, I'm back!" as we're entering the alley. He didn't need to though. There was no way in hell they wouldn't have noticed us coming in. It didn't take long. There's no squaring up, no shit being flung. It just starts a scuffle. It's dark in the alley, with only the light from the parking lot behind us spilling in. It's a tight fit, with even three people in there, and there's a total of seven of us all together swinging at each other, cussing all the way, and a bottle breaks somewhere along the way that at the time, I remember thinking one of them threw at us. In short, it's utter chaos in the alley. It's hard to even discern friend from foe. It didn't last long though. Not only were the guys outnumbered, but apparently drunk to boot, which is probably why this all started to begin with. Two of them ended up pushing past us after a pretty good beating and bolted across the parking lot. One even tripped and fell straight on his face on the concrete, but scrambled back up and kept going. That got Jake to start laughing his ass off. I was trying to tend to some swollen, probably broken knuckles, and Mark is cussing up a storm because he ripped a sleeve of his rented tux somewhere in that madness. One of the guys got knocked out cold, and I mean he's out, snoring deeply. If you ever seen someone get knocked out, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's not normal snoring, but like a loud, deep snoring. He's just laid out cold on his back in a fucking suit laying amongst trash and dirt. I asked if we should drag him out in the parking lot so someone can find him or something. But Dave just says, nah, fuck him. So we start to pile out of the alley with Mark saying, hold on, give me a minute, he'll catch up. We hear a zipper and turn around to see him with his back to us, and he's literally pissing on this guy. At which point Jake is almost doubled over laughing so hard he's wheezing. Mark gets done, zips up, and comes back outside still cussing about his sleeve. Thanks us, tells us to meet him back at his place afterwards. We split off with Jake barely able to control himself the whole time, randomly bursting back into fits of laughter. It catches on, and I follow him in the laughter. It's honestly pretty funny. Mark pissing on the guy snoring so loud he could have set off an alarm. The only one not laughing was Dave, who took a pretty good blast to the head and is complaining of a headache. We take off in his car though, and intend to just go back to his place and hang out until after prom. Along the way he stops at McDonald's and buys a few burgers. asking if we want any. The night drags by. From there, we do end up going to Mark's place after the prom, but we just don't stay too long, and he kind of politely shoos us out so he can spend the time alone with his date at the moment. We're gonna call it a night, but Dave says we haven't even touched the booze in his trunk yet, so there's no way we can even take it out, let alone drink it near his place, because his dad will beat him. Jake's mom doesn't even know he's gone and hates Dave anyway from a previous incident involving booze, you know? My house isn't gonna work either, so Dave decides we just drive to this abandoned movie theater a few blocks over and stand around outside. We agree that's exactly what we do. The idea that the police could find us here drinking becomes clear, and Dave decides to park on the block behind the movie theater with us, walking through a small little clearing of woods leading up behind the building. We've been standing near the side of the front of the building cracking jokes, and still laughing about Mark pissing on the guy in the alley. I wasn't drinking much. I don't really like beer, so I just had a few pulls from the vodka bottle. Jake was getting wobbly legged though, and Dave had already stopped, feeling a bit lightheaded. Suddenly, bright headlights pour into the parking lot, and a car comes slowly rolling in. It's about 20 feet away, and turns with the passenger door to us. Dave says he thinks it's the police, and to be ready to bolt back through the woods. Something that's probably not gonna be real easy for Jake. It's not the police though, it's a sedan of some sort, and a guy leans out the window and yells, "What the fuck are you little faggots doing here on my lot?" Jake, ever the badass of course, yells back telling them to fuck off. The guy starts to slide back into the car, and then opens the door to let himself out, and the driver turns off the engine. The guy, getting out, yells back, "What the fuck did you just say to me?" Jake kinda wobbles for a second, then pushes past me and yells at the top of his lungs, "I said go fuck yourself!" and launches a half bottle of vodka at the car. It falls short and smashes several feet in front of the guy. Then all the doors open, and the driver and 3 more guys from the backseat come pouring out. One of them has a baseball bat. Without even hesitating, I just grab Jake's collar and slap Dave on the shoulder and say it's time to go now, and we take off towards the woods. We hear them start running behind us as we come crashing through the bushes leading into the woods. Jake is stumbling all over the place to the point where I'm having to hold on to his shirt sleeve to ensure he does not take a dive. We get to the car, which is luckily unlocked, and dive inside as we kind of half-ass toss Jake into back seats, who's laughing like an asshole as he tumbles in. Dave starting up the car as we all turn and realize they didn't follow us all the way. At least if they did, we can't see them. The woods aren't thick enough to really hide too well in, but it is pretty dark at this point. It's probably after midnight. There are only 2 ways out the block we're parked in. One goes all the way around the entire neighborhood, and the other is behind us and goes back around the front of the movie theater. We decide to just go back that way as fast as we can. We probably should have went the long way around, but none of us were really completely thinking straight, to be honest, or even really sober at that point. As we come around the bend leading in front of the movie theater, the sedan is coming out of the lot, not even 3 feet from Dave's car as he passes by. I'm sitting in the passenger seat and making eye contact with a passenger from the sedan. He's got a shaved head and is shirtless, and he just flashes me this evil grin as he points at us and says something to the driver. They pull out right behind us and are right on Dave's ass. The passenger is leaning out his window and yelling something that I can't hear over the Misfits CD in the car, and then throws something that clunks off the roof of the car and going skittering over the hood, a tall bar beer can. We're coming on the 3-lane highway that's dead empty, and these guys start to speed up and try to pull up alongside my car and swerve into us. Dave panics and hits the brakes, which causes them to slightly clip his front bumper and bolt ahead of us. He then starts forward again and tries to slip behind them into the other lane. They cut him off and start to pull up against us again, this time on the driver's side. The passenger is hanging out the window again, this time almost sitting on the door, and rears back and swings something towards the car. It's the baseball bats. He misses and the car swerves for a moment. Dave is wide-eyed and muttering, "Oh shit, oh fuck shit." Even Jake has quit laughing at this point. The car swerves back, and Dave is trying to move to the far end of the lane. The passenger swings again, and connects sort of with the driver door. It clips a rearview mirror and it knocks back. Dave rolls down his window, and in desperation throws the only things he had in his hand at the sky. First the CD case, which misses the passenger and shatters against the top rim of the door, and then a handful of as much loose change as he could grab from his console. Quarters, nickels, dimes, and pennies go flying. Some of it hits the passenger in the face and arm, and some sails into the car, some missing entirely. That seems to have some sort of effect as the passenger pulls back into the car and Dave floors it. Another minute or two go on like this, and as we're coming to an intersection with another car at the light, Dave begins to slow down and turns on his turn signal to turn into the parking lot of a Quick Trip gas station. As soon as the car stops, just get out calmly and quickly, and we go inside. There's a police substation, it's safe. Just take a leak, buy a soda, something, don't act like anything is up, Dave says as he pulls in the front of the store. We get out, dart inside. Jake goes into the bathroom and is in there for a while. Dave and I buy a soda and some bottled water. The clerk asks us if we went to prom, how it was, etc. We keep small talk with him, hoping Jake didn't pass out on the toilet. He finally comes stumbling out of the bathroom, grinning. The clerk observes. Looks like he had fun. Dave nervously forces a chuckle and says he's not feeling so well. It's kind of hot outside, which it was. Our friends have pulled into the back of the parking lot behind the gas pumps and are sitting there idling. Dave notices and nods to them for me to notice. I decide to try and stall some time and ask for directions to a Taco Bell that I know full well is on the other side of town, saying we're trying to meet some friends there. The clerk is thinking on that for a moment and starts to give some pretty detailed directions there, as we notice the sedan apparently give up after sitting there for a few moments. We wait for the guy to finish, thank him, and then pick up a pack of winter mint gum that we forgot just to make sure, and pass another minute of time or so. After getting back into the car, Dave says he's gonna drop me off and then sneak Jake in through his back door to sleep it off until the morning, and that's that. We luckily didn't run into the crazy guys in the sedan again. And that ended a night that even 13 years later I'll never forget. And that was how my high school senior prom went, to the drunks in the sedan. We never did meet again, and I hope we never do. I'd like to take you to the prom. At 14 years old, I moved in with my estranged father in a rural town in the US. I found myself a former city kid living in a farmhouse on a plot of land that was half a mile from the main road, surrounded by acres of forest on all sides. It was lonely and isolated. A few handymen, who I assume were buddies of my father's or something, were working on various projects around the property. One guy named Dan was being paid a few $100s to dig a very large hole behind the house. One evening, while my father was away on a business trip to the city, Dan rolled up in his truck. That's a bit odd, but he probably made a scheduling error or something like that. I met him at the door to tell him that my dad wasn't home and try back tomorrow. My father had a very strict rule. The guys who worked on the property had to call him first before coming around. They were never supposed to show up unannounced. When I told him my father wasn't home, I was sure he would leave immediately. Instead, the expression on his face changed. Suddenly he perked up and smiled. He had very dark brown eyes, and they were set close together, and he stared with purpose. In hindsight, I'd say his stare was predatory. Also looking back, I'm fairly embarrassed by how naive and silly my answers to his questions were, I guess, at 14 years old. I was still trying hard to fit in and was excessively polite. There was a screen door between us, and he reached out and opened it, so he was holding the door in one hand while he talked to me. He started asking how I liked living in the area, and then he asked about how I liked high school. I politely told him that everything was going well so far. Are you going to the prom? He asked. I noticed around this time why his smile and dark stare were starting to bother me. There was something very deliberate, almost practiced about his questions, as if they were all just part of a memorized script. The wide smirk on his face never went away. I'm sure someone has asked you to the prom, he said. I don't think so. I'm just a sophomore, but I'm allowed to go if I go with an older student, I told him. I bet you have a lot of boyfriends, right? No, I just moved here. He didn't pick up on the obvious social cues I was sending him to leave me alone. I felt that sickness in my stomach, the nauseating and overwhelming sensation of terror. Despite keeping my cool, my mind had begun to spin crazy theories at me. What would I do if he planned on raping me? I was so far away from civilization. No one would hear me if I screamed at the top of my lungs. My mind raced through all the angles, the possibilities, the skills I should employ in this situation. I can be your boyfriend, he said, still smirking. And again, I'd like to take you to the prom. I laughed a bit. No thanks. He took a step closer, as if he were just about to step right over me and inside the house. What are you, about 16? He was now looking me over. His eyes traced me up and down. I felt as if his gaze had a slime trail across my body. Not yet, I'm turning 15, I answered. At this point, hoping he'd go away when he found out how young I really was. "Oh, that's okay," he assures me. "I like younger girls. I've had a lot of girlfriends who are your age. Are you sure you're not 16? You look really mature for your age." "Yeah, I'm sure," I said, still laughing off his comments while feeling absolutely trapped. "Look, I think you should go, because my dad could come home at any minute, and he hates when people show up unannounced, and he especially doesn't like visitors after he's been on the road all day. You know how he gets pissed about it." He shrugged. It's okay. I talked to him yesterday. Told him I'd be coming by to finish up the job, and he said he'd be home a little late. We can't wait for him together, talk some more." Well, he never said that he wanted me to invite him in the house. Everything about his body language and gaze indicated that he expected me to ask him to step inside. He was practically leaning right through the door frame. There was no way I was going to let him in, even though looking back on it, that wouldn't have really mattered. It then immediately hit me what he had just said and what it implied. He'd said that he would talk to my father, and no, he wouldn't be home until late, so what the fuck was he doing here so early? He went on some more about how he would like to take me to the prom, how he would pay for it and treat me nice, what a nice girl I was, how beautiful young girls like me are at this age, and there was no lock on that screen door, and the wooden door was warped, and had a clunky lock that took a while, and a bit of shoving to engage, so I just stood there and listened to this pervert. He presses again. "Don't you want a boyfriend?" "No, look, I don't date guys who are older, just high school boys. It'd be really weird if someone your age went to the prom." I should explain. He looked about 45. "You shouldn't say that," he smiles. "Age doesn't matter. I've been with a lot of teenagers. Some girls are very experienced, sexually, before they're 16. You seem like you've already had a lot of experiences to me. You're one of those types who is a grown woman in a younger woman's body, right?" I don't quite remember all of my dumb responses to him, but I remember very clearly his pressing the point that age is just a number, and that young girls were sexual goddesses, that older women were bitter and angry, and he loved how happy and self-assured young teen girls were. I clearly remember he said, "You don't have to decide whether you want to go to prom with me right away. Let's hang out a bit first, and get to know each other." I finally said something to the effect of, "I'm going back inside now, have a good night. I'm probably gonna call my dad to find out when he's coming home." There was no way that was possible. This was before cell phones were very common, and I had no idea where my father was at that moment. He took my hand and kissed it, right before my first and second knuckles. I wanted to vomit. He said, "Okay, I'll be going then." "I'll have to see you soon, princess." Princess? I withdrew inside the house, relieved he was going. I watched him walk down to his truck in the driveway, started up and back out of our driveway, so I didn't bother trying to lock the door. Instead, I went to my room on the second floor. My window looked out upon a small stretch of the dirt road that led to the main road. The truck, a white pickup, exited the driveway but pulled over, further back on the road. I could just see the tail end of it and remained parked there without the lights on. I was confused. He had pulled out, then pulled to the side of the dirt road behind some bushes. But from that second floor window, I could clearly see that he was gone no more than 50 feet from the driveway. The truck remained there for about 20 minutes. I like to think that he wasn't trying to hide his truck from me, but had I been on the first floor, it would have appeared that he had driven away. When my father came home later that night, I told him about Dan's visit. My father wasn't outraged on my behalf, sort of bemused perhaps. He was more pissed about Dan being around the house at all. He said, "I fired him last week. He knows better than to be around here. He should be calling first." So my father called up Dan and cursed him out for coming to the house when he had been specifically told not to return, threatening him with physical violence if he ever showed up on his property again. He added, "And don't talk to my daughter while she's here alone, you scare her." I learned later why my father had a rule about the guys who worked on the property, and why they always had to call first before coming over. He was mainly worried that they'd rob him, because the guys he'd hired were all ex-cons who charged the discounted, under-the-table rates. Most of them, including Dan, were on parole for violent crimes and had very few job prospects elsewhere. Dan had recently been released from prison, and my father just didn't trust him. I don't know what his crimes were, but I can take a guess. I heard he returned to prison about a year later. Followed by a redneck rampager on prom night. Hello everyone, long-time lurker here. I never really thought I had a good story, but I just enjoy reading them. As I was going through the sub today, though, I realized I might have one from a few months back. Not the worst thing to ever happen to me, but it still puts shivers down my spine. So, to set this up, it was the night of prom, and me and about 5 other girls, all around 17 to 18 years old, pretty much all black, had left the venue and were driving around aimlessly, hoping to catch a party to go to. Every place we went to ended up being a bust or getting busted by cops, so we were heading to go hang out with some friends at around 2 to 3 a.m. It's important to note that none of us were inebriated in any manner, so by this time of night, the roads are almost completely empty. We live in a rural suburban Northern Virginia, and it's incredibly dark as the car had broken high beams. The driver, Key, made a turn down a road and, seeing as it was incredibly dark, briefly drove in the wrong lane, no divider. It lasted around 5 seconds or so, and absolutely no one was on the street, so she just calmly corrected herself. Right as she makes it to the correct lane, a car, about 50 to 100 feet behind us, turns on his headlights and lays on the horn. It seemed like this guy appeared out of nowhere, and I found it incredibly strange he didn't have his headlights on, as it was a new moon and almost completely dark, so she waves her hand out of the window and says sorry. But the guy was just not having it. He immediately sped up, riding our tail and honking almost constantly, to the point we were going around 60 in a 30 zone. He was in a huge black truck, waving a Confederate flag out of the back, and we were in a tiny green Kia, so we were understandably terrified. He ended up actually ramming our bumper a few times, although not enough to dent the car or move it, thankfully. We're debating what to do, whether we should call the cops or not, when Key takes a few sharp turns and ends up losing the guy to stop in a parking lot. We wait super quietly under this shady tree, ready to drive off or call the police or both for a few minutes. One of my friends suddenly notices his truck parked a few parking lots away, separated by a few trees, in a way that we can see him, but we were hoping he couldn't see us. I don't have the best eyesight, but even I could see him jump out of the car. The guy was massive, wide, and tall, holding something in his arms and waving it around. Another friend with more gun experience than I points out it looks like it could be a shotgun. We wait for a few seconds, paralyzed in fear, as he yells something along the lines of, "Yo, niggers, come on now!" After we all wisened up, Key puts the car into drive and sped out of that parking lot as fast as she could. We were visibly shaken and immediately went home so we could safely freak the fuck out and to make sure to see if he was following us the whole way. So, crazy redneck rampager. Let's not meet!